what do I need to do? I just need to dive in and start swimming 6 strokes, and it'll be 36 strokes on the way out and it'll be 42 strokes on the way back, and then I'm done and I'm finished. So there was no way I was thinking about anyone else other than me and my first 6 strokes, and that's it. When the moment gets big, my focus gets small.
Break it up into tiny little pieces. That's the valuable advice on how to tackle big challenges from Olympic swimmer Bronte Campbell. Bronte's had her eyes on Olympic gold since watching the 2000 Olympics as a kid. But of course, she wasn't the only one in her house with such lofty ambitions. For her entire sporting career, Bronte and her older sister Cate have competed alongside and against one another, eventually becoming the first Aussie sisters ever to compete in the same swimming event in the Olympics. You'll hear her story today on Curveball. You won't be surprised to hear that one of Australia's most successful swimmers spent most of her childhood in the water. But you might not have expected that water to be crocodile and hippopotamus-infested Lake Malawi. Bronte Campbell's family moved to Australia eventually, and so pool swimming became Bronte's obsession. But she wasn't the only one in the household with those ambitions to make it to the Olympics. Her older sister Cate became Bronte's biggest supporter, but also her biggest rival, as they both battled for Commonwealth Games and Olympic Games glory. Beyond the endless questions about this unique sibling rivalry, though, Bronte's career has been littered with a lot of other challenging moments. Her Olympic debut coincided with a scandal in the swimming team. She's battled injuries and chronic pain for years. And she was on the squad in 2020 when the Olympics was cancelled for something other than a war for the first time in history. In 2018, you were there at the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast, very close to where you grew up in Brisbane. You've just finished the 100 metres freestyle with a gold medal and the Games record in front of a home crowd, which would have been absolutely spine-tingling. But there's one crucial detail that perhaps wasn't sitting right with you, and that's the silver medal holder. Walk me through that event at the Com Games.
Yeah, Commonwealth Games, I have really, really fond memories of that. I don't think I've ever been in a stadium with 10,000 people singing your national anthem. That was an incredible feeling, standing on the dais and hearing Advance Australia Fair ring out from 10,000 throats. That's something I'm never, ever going to forget. But that 100 freestyle meant a lot to me. The 100 freestyle was and is the blue ribbon event of every single swim meet. And for me, it was the first time I'd done a PB in that event since I had become injured. So it was a very, very big deal for me to prove to myself that I could still be at my best and better than my best, even once having injuries. So there was incredible joy for me winning that event. You can definitely see it in the pictures. I'm completely ecstatic, but as you said in the introduction, I'm not always alone while I'm swimming. I'm swimming next to my big sister, who I've been racing with and against since I was sort of 7 years old, which is a really long time now. And that was her first race back since the 2016 Olympics, where she'd had a very disappointing race in the 100 freestyle. And I just knew that for her, winning the 100 freestyle at the Commonwealth Games would have felt like a big redemption moment. And while I was ecstatic for myself and so happy that I'd managed to achieve something which, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I could. I wasn't sure that I could swim fast again after I got injured. That was something I was really trying to prove to myself in that race. And I was so happy with the time, obviously happy to walk away with a gold medal, but at the same time, looking at Cate and knowing that she would be incredibly disappointed and it wasn't what she wanted. And if I wasn't there, she would have got what she wanted, which is a hard thing that we've both had to balance. There's so many times where we are stopping one of the people we love most in the world from achieving what they want in pursuit of achieving what we want. It's a very difficult thing to balance.
You had, of course, beaten Cate, as you mentioned, in the 2016 Olympics, where she was going in as the world record holder. She didn't place. I think you were fourth by a whisker. This is meant to be, as you say, her redemption race. What was going on in your mind as you stood on the blocks that day?
Standing behind the blocks is the most nerve-wracking and best place to be. It's just that moment where you can't actually do anything else other than race. There's no more preparation you can do. Everything has already been done, and now it's just up to you. You've left your coach and your teammates. You walk out alone. You stand there alone, and now the next minute, it all rests on you. That whole team that has put you there, they're all watching, and it's now up to you to convert it. And I love that moment. It's the most high pressure moment. You can feel your heart beating, your palms are all sweaty. Often when I'm going down onto the block and they go take your marks, your hands and legs are shaking. There's so much adrenaline. But I love the pressure of that and the excitement of that. It's a place of like great failure and great success. They're both possible in that same moment. It's like Pavlov's moment or something. The next minute literally decides how all your work will be converted. Standing behind the blocks, I was really, really nervous for that event. It's very funny. My friend Ellie Cole was in the crowd and she was like, "You looked so calm. How are you so calm before your race?" I was like, "You have no idea how nervous I was before that." But I just focused on my first 6 strokes. So to get rid of those nerves, I was just like, okay, well, what do I need to do? I just need to dive in and start swimming 6 strokes, and it'll be 36 strokes on the way out and it'll be 42 strokes on the way back, and then I'm done and I'm finished. So I'm very process driven in those moments. And there was no way that I was thinking about Cate or Shayna, who was in the race, or Taylor Rock, who was the Canadian who was swimming really fast. There was no way I was thinking about anyone else other than me and my first 6 strokes. And that's it. When the moment gets big, my focus gets small.
That's really interesting to me that you're focused on the first 6 strokes, because, in my head, it's like you're just focused on, touching the wall at the end and winning Olympic gold or Commonwealth Games gold. Have you carried that philosophy into other things in life where, if you think about the whole, you could be quite overwhelmed?
Absolutely. That is probably one of the best things I've ever taken from swimming. I just started my own business, and the idea of starting your own business was terrifying to me. And how do I get to the end of that? I didn't even know what that road looked like, but it's almost a habit now that when something is quite big and overwhelming, I just look at like the first step. So like, what is the first 6 things I need to do to be able to start a business? Okay, well, like probably get an ABN, probably look at like, what should I call it? Go through that business, talk to people about it, start asking questions. I was like, okay, I'll start with those things. And I started with those things, and then obviously they lead to the next 6 things and before you know it, you're halfway down the road. And I believe that in my core that is the way to approach anything that's overwhelming. It's how I approached injury management as well. It seemed overwhelming, like how, especially things that are uncertain. So I'm not even 100% sure what caused all my injuries, other than doing 19,000 swim strokes every week for my whole life. That might be the reason. But what exactly caused it? And I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And while none of my injuries are fixed, they are managed just by doing tiny little steps at a time. And there's that old saying of like, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. And I have no interest in eating an elephant, but I do like that saying.
I like it a lot too. And as you say, there was this time once you were in your teenage years, you were already starting to focus on a professional swimming career. Tell me about that first setback, because I think you were only about 15 or 16 when you started to battle against injury.
Yeah, I was 15 when I had my first surgery on my hip. Weirdly enough, Cate, my older sister, also had a hip injury. So
you too.
I know. It's like I was copying her. Not the greatest thing to copy her on. I wish I had like copied her on like how tall I am or something, rather than she's like 10 centimeters taller than me, rather than just the same injury. But yeah, started battling that injury pretty early on, and that's still one that I manage today. The surgery didn't entirely fix it, but it did help. And I think I was really lucky. I had people around me to hold up the belief while I was going through that. So I had a brilliant coach who was able to say, well, don't worry, this is a short setback. We'll come back from this. And very similar timing, about a year later, I had glandular fever and post-viral fatigue, which was terrible because that was a huge plateau in my performance. And I could have very easily dropped out of the sport at that point. Without the belief of my coach and my family, it would have been very easy to walk away. But sometimes when you're doubting yourself, it's nice to have other people around to say, like, we're going to get through this. Don't worry, there's a plan. And look at more of the big picture, because when you're in the moment of it being bad, it's hard to think that in a year it might actually be better.
I think for any 15-year-old who's on the track to becoming an Australian swimmer, to have an injury to battle and the pain that goes with that is one thing. But you're also sitting in a household where there's someone 2 years ahead of you who's already starting to make those national teams and go to international events. So how much did it play on your psyche that Cate could be going to the Olympics and I could be giving up swimming?
Yeah, I mean, by that point, when I was 15, Cate qualified for her first games when she was 15. So she'd already been to an Olympics. She'd already been to a World Championships. And I was getting very used to people turning to me and saying, oh, do you swim too? And I was like, firstly, it was my idea to be a swimmer in the first place. So yes, I do swim too. And it was both a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing being like, okay, well, I've seen someone do this. I know this is actually possible. There's always that saying is you can't be what you don't see. And I could see it every single day. I could see what success looked like. I could see what it looked like to be an Olympic swimmer. And not only in the pool, but in all of her habits outside of the pool, and how she dealt with her own injury and the professionalism around that, which she showed at a very young age. So there was that side of it. And then there's also the other side of it, which is the constant comparison and the constant trying to live up to something that's very big. And by the time I was 15 and I had a hip injury and then I had post-viral fatigue, it was like, well, Cate achieved an Olympic bronze medal at 15 and you haven't qualified for anything. So therefore you are failure, which is obviously it's a ridiculous bar to clear, but and I never thought of myself as young when I qualified for the team at 17. I thought, oh, like finally. Now that I'm 29, I'm like, you're so young. When you're 17, you're just a little baby. But for me, it was like, oh, finally. And it definitely, that comparison definitely took away some of the moments of celebration for me. Because it wasn't new. It was sort of, by that point, expected.
It is such a long road to come back from injury or illness for anyone, but particularly for an elite athlete where your body is the very thing that you're relying on. And so head forward to 2016, ahead of the Rio Olympics, you have this trouble with your shoulder. Once you've had a chronic pain battle, it's almost like you know what you're in for. And so it's even scarier, I imagine, the second time around. How were you coping with this sense of, oh my God, here we go again?
Yeah, not well. Getting injured is it is the nightmare that just keeps on going. And in 2016, at the start of 2016, I'd come off the back of winning the World Championships in 2015. Everything was tracking really well. And then literally within 50 meters, I went from just like a normal sort of tight pain in my shoulder to this like real sharp, damaging sort of pain and numbness down my arm and into my fingers. And you're like, okay, maybe this will be fixed in a week. But there's just something in the back of your mind being like, nothing like this has ever been fixed in a week. And you just know you're in for a huge battle. It adds a very, very big mental load. And while I was hopeful it would be fixed quickly, it wasn't. And by the time I was heading into the Rio Olympics, I was doing way less than I should have been in the pool. I just couldn't swim. I just couldn't get my shoulder into a good enough place to get the training done. And it's not a nice feeling standing behind the blocks, knowing you haven't done the work that you used to do. And that was definitely my mistake, is that I kept trying to do the work that I used to do rather than pivoting to the circumstances have changed, therefore the sort of work that I'm doing needs to change. And while we tried some adjustments, my mindset was more, let me push through this injury and push through the pain as much as possible, rather than let's adapt to it as much as possible. And that was what I learned in the years afterwards, is just being constantly creative. It's obviously mentally quite draining, constantly after thinking of new ways to do the things that you used to be able to do. But it's definitely been the way that I've managed my injury for the last 6 years.
That is so interesting to me, because so many people, whether they're operating a business, leading a team, you sort of learn a pattern of behaviour that you enact and you get rewarded for it, right? You get promoted, and that's why you're really good at what you do. And then suddenly at some point it doesn't work anymore. And changing the direction that you're going can be quite difficult. It's very difficult to undo those patterns of behaviour. So what do you think you learnt from the process of rehabbing, or the one strategy that you think you really took during that time that worked?
I actually learned this strategy from someone who was working with the commandos and special forces. And they obviously actually have life or death situations, which I do not. So I was like, anything that these guys use to deal with uncertainty is going to be pretty good. And that's really what I was facing. The fear with my injury was facing uncertainty. So they sort of look at failing and failing fast, or just looking at any situation and doing a bit of they call it a hot wash afterwards. And whatever you do, you just say, what worked, what didn't work, and what's the fix? After anything, it can be after doing a 50-meter sprint and being like, okay, well, what worked, what didn't work, what's the fix? Or it can be after trying something new in exercises or trying something new in the gym. And I just sort of brought a bit more curiosity, and brought that mindset helped me make my decisions really solid, because it's hard when you're trying something. There's a lot of variables, right? So you're trying like, okay, does this work? Well, I'm not actually 100% sure, but being like, what worked about this? What didn't work about it? And what can I fix for the thing that didn't work? It makes it a little bit more nuanced than just this works or it doesn't work.
Let's head to the 2012 London Olympics. So I'm just curious about what it's like to be selected for an Olympic team for the first time. Like, what's going on for you at that moment?
That race where I got selected for the 2012 Olympics is still my absolute favourite swimming race I've ever had. Like, I've been on top of a podium, I've won Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games, and we've broken world records. But like that moment in the 50 freestyle where I touched the wall second, you had to finish first or second, and I turned around and I knew that this dream that I'd had since I was 7 years old had just come true. And not only had come true, it had come true next to my big sister. It was always our dream to go to the Olympics together. That is the happiest I can ever remember feeling after a race. It was just absolute pure joy. Like, that is this little 7-year-old inside of me who was jumping out of her skin, who just couldn't believe that she was going to get to put on a green and gold uniform and represent her country. And I try and use that joy when I'm feeling incredibly nervous or anxious before races. And I just try and think about that feeling and that 7-year-old, and she wouldn't be scared to be standing behind the blocks, because when you're 7 you don't know to be scared, you just think it's all going to be great, right? So like, she wouldn't be scared, she would be unbelievably stoked that she was now at her 10th year representing Australia. She wouldn't even have dreamt that. All she wanted to do was go to one Olympics. Now look at her. So I try and bring that joy every time and harness it. Sometimes it's harder to access than others, but I've honestly never felt that joy after a race ever again.
I also think, despite that joy of qualifying, that once you were actually at the Olympics in London, that you felt like a bit of an imposter. You know, what were you doing to calm yourself down? Why did you think you were an imposter? You've been doing this since you were 7.
I had, but it's very funny. I got to the Olympics and I looked around and spent most of my waking moments thinking about going to the Olympics and qualifying for the Olympics. And then I looked around and there was all these like really big names in swimming, like Michael Phelps was there.
Everyone's an
Olympian, right? And I was looking around, I was like, I actually don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know how to be an Olympian. Like, I don't know how to talk to the media or like wave at the cameras, or like there's just people that have been doing this like almost as long as I've been alive. They've been at the Olympics, right? So I was like, I just don't know how to be an Olympian. Everyone looks so self-assured, and there were all these great stretching techniques, and everyone's walking around on pool deck, and there's like a bit of posturing in the warm-up days beforehand, where everyone like walks around and like checks each other out. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. And someone on the team was like, no, you don't have to be an Olympian. You just have to swim 50 meters. Like, you just have to get from this end of the pool to that end of the pool. It's pretty simple. I was like, you're right. Once again, make it simple, make it simple. And that's all I had to do. And that really helped calm me down.
You know, I think we in Australia, we place so much emphasis on what our Australian swimming team is doing. Like, we just really invest in you guys. The 2012 team was criticised by the media for a perceived, not very good performance. What was that like for you, experiencing it from the other side?
That was really heartbreaking for me on the other side of it. Hearing that, oh, your team's underperforming, Australia's disappointed in you. You're so far away from your friends and family and the people that are actually care about you in a proper way. And you're just hearing the whole of Australia is disappointed in you. And I only raced on the last day. So by the time the last day came around, it had already been decided that the team was a failure. And it's a pretty disempowering feeling of, oh, it doesn't even matter what I do here. Everyone's already decided that the Australian swim team sucks. It's really damaging. It's very interesting. I love this because if you look at an article from day one, we weren't supposed to win the 4x100 freestyle relay. The Dutch team was supposed to win. They were 3 seconds ahead on paper. And the Australians had an incredible relay. They pulled it out. My sister was in that relay and they won gold. And the headline was, "Gold already, we're just that good." Which is, and then...
Humble.
Yeah, I know. And then 3 days later, when James Magnussen came second in the 100 freestyle by 0.01 of a second, and Emily Seebohm came second in the 100 backstroke by 0.1, suddenly it was like, will we ever get gold? That was then the next headline. And then by the time I jumped in the pool, it was, this team is a failure. So from the outside, obviously there's a way to say, oh, you should just block that out. You shouldn't read newspaper articles. You shouldn't watch the TV, etc. I actually don't read newspaper articles. I never watch anything that I'm on. But in the team room, there was the Courier Mail, which was delivered every day and sat there. And you're just getting your morning coffee and you see a headline. That's all it takes. It's even harder now with social media and everything being online. It's even harder to avoid it, especially like people want to show you things. They're like, oh, here, look at this. You're like, I don't want to see it. Like, but I've seen it now. Like, I can't do anything about that. So it's very interesting. The dynamic that goes on within a team gets very much affected by the performance from the start of the meet.
And then there was the Still Knox scandal as well. Had people taken, a drug? Was it illegal in terms of the swimming world, etc.? Was it a banned substance? How much did that affect you all at the time versus, I guess, post the event, the continued fallout?
Well, I had no idea about that at the time. So that was very much contained within the team. And Still Knox is not like a banned substance at all in terms of doping. It was just that the Australian Olympic Committee said that they didn't want anyone to take it because it has side effects that can be a bit not great in a team environment. So I had no idea about that until afterwards. And then afterwards I found out about it through the media, which is always fun to have journalists ringing you and asking you about things you have no idea about. And I felt very much like I was very far away from any of that, but the blame gets heaped on the entire swim team. That was also very difficult to deal with, to come back to being told you're a disappointment, and also, by the way, you're all drug cheats, because as soon as someone says, oh, banned substance, it wasn't always clear that it wasn't a banned drug. It was just prohibited on the AOC Olympic team.
Do people protect you in those situations? Who gathers around you? Who stops the media ringing you? Who coaches you on what you're going to say? Like, how do you deal with that? You're 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, you just don't answer your phone. At that time, we didn't have a lot of media training or a lot of support. We were off team as well. So I think that's also another like sort of misconception about swimming, is that like you're a team for the whole time. You sort of come together, you get selected 5 weeks before your major meet, then you come together and train together for a bit, and then you go away and compete. And then when you come back, you disband and you go back to all your far reaches of Australia and all to your own squad environments. So it's up to you guys to sort of stay connected outside of that. So you're sort of on your own again, back with your family unit and your squad and your coach, etc. So they become sort of your key support mechanism, and then other people on the team as well. You can obviously reach out to them, but you are pretty isolated.
So there's already 2 curveballs thrown at this young 18-year-old first-time Olympian, but then you had a third one, some serious concerns immediately after the Games.
Yeah, we were actually at the closing ceremony, and so we got a call that my younger brother, Hamish, had just been rushed into hospital. So he'd been over at their games and then come back. Hamish has cerebral palsy, so he's got he's never had huge health issues before, but we found out that his bowel had nearly ruptured and he was in emergency surgery. So it was supposed to be this big celebration of the games, and we were just sitting there like, I don't know what's going to happen on the other side of this. Like, we have to just get on a plane and get home. Like, get me back as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I can see how much that still impacts on you today. And I can't even imagine the extremes here, you know, to go from standing on an Olympic stage to, you know, my brother's in really critical, dire straits here, and I just want to get on the next plane home. And the cortisol, the adrenaline that runs through your body across that roller coaster, did it take a while for you to decompress? And we should also say that Hamish is still with us. He's okay. But, you know, that would have been incredibly stressful.
It was very stressful. And once we got home, it was then my brother's nonverbal. So being in the hospital, he needs someone there to advocate for him at all times. So as soon as we got home, Mum was in the hospital for a few months. My dad had to go back to work, and Cate and myself then picked up the running of the rest of the house, because I've got 2 younger sisters as well who needed to go to school and all their other activities. Like, luckily both of us had our licenses by then, and in between all of that, trying to visit the hospital and go in there as much as possible. We had amazing community around us who, I mean, I'm never going to turn down a meal from anyone. It's such a beautiful thing when everyone comes around and drops by a lasagna. It's just a beautiful outpouring when you see that in a community. And thank goodness I didn't have to cook all the dinners, because I'm still not a great cook. But it in a weird way, it helped deal with what a stressful thing London Olympics had been, because I came back to something that actually mattered and was actually stressful. And you're like, oh, so your swimming race didn't go well? Like, who cares? Who actually cares?
What the papers said doesn't matter.
Exactly, yeah. So in some ways it was quite good, but it took a while to have the headspace to then think about London, because we went straight into sort of survival mode.
I'm wondering what your parents' involvement in both yours and Cate's career has been, because as you mentioned, you're one of 5 kids, and Hamish has some needs as well. And there's 2 Olympians in the family, so one might assume that you've got those super pushy, sporty parents who've got their whole focus, poured straight into the 2 of you. Is that the case?
We definitely took up a lot of time, but I wouldn't have said that our parents were pushy in any way. When we were training, they were very, and when we were still living at home, it was very much like they'll put in whatever whatever we put in. And they were very good about never telling us that the dream was too big or that it was going to be very difficult. We used to sit in the back of the car and talk about all the things we'd do after we went to the Olympics, and they never turned around and said, you know that 0.04% of people qualify for the Olympics? So like, okay, well, if you want to do that, you organize it and we'll support it. And that looked like if I wanted to go to training at 4:30 in the morning, I set my alarm and I got up, and then just before I wanted to leave, I had to go wake mum up. And if I didn't go wake her up, then I wasn't going to training. There was no like getting me out of bed and like dragging me off to training. If I wanted it, I had to do it. And that was a really, really good mindset. But it also, we were never very much the only focus of our family. Like one of the days I won a gold medal, my first gold medal for a state championship, and I came home and I was so excited. And like my brother had learnt how to hold a spoon, which he'd been trying to do for months because he likes to throw things. So he was always throwing it away. And he just decided that he was actually going to hold the spoon. And there was this like, maybe Hamish will feed himself, which he never really got the point of what holding the spoon was for. But we were celebrating that night instead of the 50 freestyle win, which to me seemed fair enough as well, because we'd all been watching Hamish throw spoons around for months.
This is Curveball, and my guest is Australian swimmer Bronte Campbell. Shortly, we'll go right back to the start, well before Bronte arrived on Aussie soil. I'm Kelly Reardon, and this is Curveball. My guest is Olympic swimmer and writer Bronte Campbell. Bronte, you didn't start swimming in Australia. You started in a lake in a very tiny country in Africa. Can you tell me why and how your childhood rolled?
Malawi, where I grew up, is a beautiful place. It's actually 1/3 of the country is lake. So it's probably not, it's probably meant to be that I ended up a swimmer growing up in such an aquatic environment. But my parents were from South Africa. They moved to Malawi for a job and stayed there for 10 years. So I grew up running around barefoot. I barely ever wore shoes until I came to Australia. We were homeschooled with a bunch of the other local kids. I learnt to swim in my backyard pool and my grand's backyard pool. She used to teach people to swim. And then we'd all go do choir lessons at someone else's house. And it was a very much a free-range sort of childhood that I spent in Africa, but also surrounded by incredible poverty, which I didn't really appreciate until I moved to Australia. I didn't really understand how the rest of the world operated. I didn't understand that the town I grew up in had one traffic light and it didn't work most of the time because the power was out. We had a generator because the power was out most of the time. Every time we left the house, there was heaps of street kids and beggars and most people living in mud huts and dirt roads most of the time outside of the city, and just incredible poverty all around and people struggling just to survive every single day. And I'd never seen a house without a fence around it or a big wall around it until I moved to Australia, where like no one has a fence around their house. It was like mind blowing to me that everyone had these houses that just like opened out onto the street.
It must have been a culture shock then once you did move to Australia. Can you remember the sort of discombobulation once you arrived here?
Oh, it definitely was such a huge shock to me. I moved when I was 7, so I was still pretty young. I went to school for the first time. I had to wear shoes all the time for the first time. When we first moved to Australia, we joined the local swimming club down the road. It was in between school terms, so I wasn't going to start until the next term. And this was our first introduction to Australian life. And I used to walk to the swimming pool. It was literally just down the street, but I'd walk there with like my cap and goggles already on and like every single color of the rainbow in my clothing. Like, I mean, if anyone's ever been to Africa, they know how amazing Africans' color sense is. It's just all the colors all at once. And that was me, but no shoes. Like definitely no shoes. Just walk down the road, go to the swimming pool.
And is it true that your mum was a synchronised swimmer? And did she ever try to get you into that sport?
Yeah, my mum was a synchronized swimmer back when she lived in South Africa, and she used to teach the local high school team in Malawi. And I mean, when we used to go along with her, we were allowed to get in, but only if we could keep up. So it was get in and keep up. Like I was 5 at this point. So I did get in and do my synchronized swimming training. It's a very difficult sport. I think they call it artistic swimming now, but I did one competition and I came 4th out of 4 people, and I did this solo routine, which I still remember bits of it now. I must have been about 6 when I did this. I got 3 out of 10 from all the judges, and one of the judges was my mom. So I don't think I was really born for a life in synchronized swimming. I just I'm really glad that I switched over to trying to swim as fast as possible, not as prettily as possible.
And what did, once you were in Brisbane, you're training at Indooroopilly Swimming Club, what does the training regime look like for a 7-year-old Bronte? Because I'm getting the sense that you're pretty driven from even a young age, but what does that swimming routine look like when you're 7, 8 years old?
I was probably doing 4 or 5 sessions a week. Like I would go in.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And there was a lot of people that would say that that's too much. And honestly, if I was looking at a 7-year-old, I would say that that's too much. But you honestly couldn't have stopped me from doing it. I would be moping if I wasn't at the pool and training. Like I used to walk myself down to the swimming pool. I started swimming at 7 a.m. I'd walk myself down there at 6 o'clock so I could watch the big kids train for an hour before I got in, because like I was convinced it would make me a better swimmer. Like I was obsessed with it. And I mean, maybe I wasn't doing that much. Maybe when I was 8 or 9, I was doing that much, but I just loved it. You honestly couldn't have pulled me back. And there's definitely a thing around burnout and doing too much when you're young. And sometimes I look at how little I was and just be like, couldn't you just have chilled out? Like nothing you did when you were that age was going to make that much difference. And my coach did actually say that to me when I was pushing to train on Saturday mornings. And he was like, look, there are no world champion 7-year-olds. You just need to chill out and like, we'll get there. And I'm really glad that I had a coach that had that sort of perspective. You don't have a lot of perspective when you're 7. You've only been in the world for 7 years. But he was like, I want you to be good in 10 years' time, not like the best 7-year-old that we've ever seen, because that's not very useful.
Cate, I think, was probably less driven or didn't have the same steely focus as you. Obviously, lots of natural ability. And I want to talk about your coach, Simon, who had coached you from when you were very, very young all the way up to the Olympics. How did he navigate the differences in your personalities and bring out the best in each of you? I assume he wasn't applying the same logic to the two of you.
No, Simon was my coach from when I was 7 until I was 28. So we spent 21 years together, seeing each other almost every day. And there's many sides to coaching. There's the technical side, and learning all of that and structuring the training. And then there is really this personal connection of how do I get the best out of this athlete and this person. And he was always very good about keeping us as separate people and explicitly saying that to me. Like I said earlier about comparison being a really big thing throughout my career. Simon was very good at being like, okay, you're your own person, you've got your own set of skills, and you're going to develop at a different rate, and you don't need to be comparing yourself to Cate. Like we'll get there, and it will look different, and that's okay. So he was always incredibly good at that, both on a technical level and then on a personal level. But his philosophy was sort of the same throughout. He was always about just enjoying your actual performance. Before we go out behind the blocks, all he says to us is good luck and enjoy. I'll see you on the other side. There's no big pep talk. It's everything that we need to do we've already done, and we have this baked in belief that we've done everything that we can, and he's helped us get there. So he's also been incredibly good at looking at the big picture. If a race goes wrong, it's like, okay, let's have a look at it and and see what could have been different there. It's not it's never recrimination, which I've always found really great, because you get to compete from a place of empowerment rather than a place of fear. You're like, what could I possibly achieve here, as opposed to, oh, I hope I don't screw up because then my coach will be angry at me.
How crucial is that to an athlete's mindset? And I ask that not of you as an Olympic athlete, but perhaps as me, a parent of two young girls who play sport, and they're not going to go to the Olympics, but they're representative players already. It is so easy. I see it every weekend. I'm guilty of it myself. We put so much pressure on our kids, even at club sport where it doesn't really matter. How do you instill in other people that you're supportive of them and you want them to do well, but without putting pressure on them? What are the things that Simon says around that?
Yeah, firstly, I'm not a parent, so I would never think to give parenting advice, but I will say the things that have worked for me. And before I say that, it actually doesn't matter whether it's the Olympics or your local district meet. I think there's all those things build on top of each other. I remember being just as nervous for my first ever zones carnival as I was when I walked out for Olympic trials. It means a lot to both the children and the parents involved. So I don't actually think that there's a difference. It's also, when you say rep stuff doesn't matter, realistically the Olympics doesn't matter either. It's only because we think it's important that it's important. So there's that to start off with. But I think something that we've worked on the swimming team, and I've been part of the athlete leadership group for a while, and we work on, you are valued as a human being and celebrated for your performance. So if whatever ways you can find to be it doesn't matter what you achieve, your value doesn't change. Your value doesn't change in my eyes as your parents. Your value doesn't change in my eyes as your coach. Your value doesn't change in my eyes as your teammate. And then anything on top of that is then celebrated. For parents and coaches, those sort of things are really important. If you can find a way to build that in. If there's some ritual that you do after a game, and you do it whether the game was a success or whether the team had the worst game they've ever had and missed every single ball and every single shot at goal, it's okay, it doesn't matter what happens. You get a hug after the game, and we go get a icy ball from the canteen or whatever. And so there's this ritual that means, okay, you've gone out and done your thing and you've come back, and now I love you regardless. I think that's been something we spent a lot of time trying to build.
It's interesting because I think coaches or sort of mindset coaches like Ben Crow, who's been working with Ash Barty, it's all about, I love you unconditionally, you are your own person, you're more than your sport. That does seem to have shifted from, say, in the 80s with some of those athletes. I think about Michael Jordan, clearly put a lot of pressure on not just himself, but the Chicago Bulls around him. It was, a high intensity space. Do you think that that's just about, a shift in time? Is it that we've learnt more about what neurology, how that works?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a shift in time in how we talk about these things. I can't imagine someone in the 80s having this conversation that we're having today. That would be impossible. Even the fact that two women talking about sport would have been impossible.
How dare
right?
we?
Exactly, right? Do you even actually like sport? Do you know what that is? So definitely shift in time. And we have learnt more. It shows that if I take the swim team, we've just had our most successful ever Olympic Games, tied with the 2000 Olympics, which was a home games. We've had our most successful Commonwealth Games last year, and we've just had our most successful World Championships. So it's pretty incredible to see those results on the end of it, when the focus used to be, okay, as a team we need to win 8 gold medals or we are a failure as a team. And that I always found that a very overwhelming way of looking at it, because I might have only been swimming one event. It's how on earth am I going to win 8 gold medals? I can't contribute to the team in that way. But I can contribute to the team by making it a good environment, by living up to our values, by making sure that everyone knows that I've got them, that we can perform better when we all work together as a team. I can still contribute outside of my performance. And that shift, I think, takes the pressure off performing in the actual race, performing in the actual game, similar to what you were saying with Michael Jordan. Like, we've also seen how damaging it is when you walk outside of a sport and the only thing you've pinned your self-worth on is how many baskets you've got or how fast you've swum up and down a swimming pool. We've seen how damaging that is. And I think sport in general, to its credit, has started looking at, okay, let's try and make better people, not just better sports people.
Speaking of which, you're trying to go to the Olympics again. You want to go to Paris 2024. You're training pretty hard, and I know you're not putting too much pressure on it because, you know, and I think Cate, I mean, what will this be? Olympics number 5? That'll be a record, right, if she makes the team?
Yeah, she'll be the first one to go to 5. There's only 3 Australian swimmers who've been to 4 Olympics, Liesl Jones, Bronte Campbell and Emily Seebohm. I'm looking to become one of the ranks, so maybe the 4th person to go to 4 Olympics. If Cate qualifies for this next Olympics, she will be the first Australian swimmer to go to 5, which is insane. It's such a long time to be like at the top of your game. It's crazy.
Especially in a sport like this. How much pressure are you placing on that, and how much time are you spending? Because I know you had 18 months off before you really decided, I am going to try for Paris. How much time do you spend thinking about your future beyond swimming and what that kind of feels like? You know, it must be so weird to have your whole focus on something in quite tunnel vision terms, but then you've got the rest of your life to live. How much time do you spend thinking about that?
I spend quite a lot of time thinking about it, actually, and I find it great to think about. I really like thinking about it. So in those 18 months I had off, I just finished my business degree. I went and got a proper job, as you would say. I worked at EY in business consulting and looked at life outside of the pool. And I wouldn't have come back to swimming if I hadn't done that. I needed to prove to myself that there was something beyond the black line for me. And I needed to know what that looked like because it's so abstract. It's like when someone says business consultant, I was like, I have no idea what that person does every day. What do you do? I have no idea. You go into the city and you go into a tower, and that's like my idea of what a business person is. I don't know what you do up there. So I needed to experience new things and challenge myself in new ways and prove to myself that I could do it. I spent a year working at EY and I really enjoyed my time there. Now that I'm training again, it's become a bit too difficult. So I've sort of put that on hold. But I know that there's options for me waiting at the other end. And it really inspired me to just start challenging myself outside of the pool and really building out what Bronte Campbell person is as opposed to Bronte Campbell swimmer, because I really am reaching the end. Like, there is one more year and that is it. I am not going anymore.
But if that Cate does 5, Bronte, then what are you going to do?
I'm just going to be very happy for her and walk away.
Good on you. Let's talk about your new business. You mentioned that you've started a business. Can you tell me what PB is and where the idea came from?
Yeah, so my new business is called PB with Bronte, with me. PB for me is, PB stands for personal best. In swimming, it's what you're always chasing. You're always chasing to be better. And when I was thinking about why I wanted to come back and go again and see if I could go to my 4th Olympics, yes, it was about going to the Olympics, but it was also about trying to be better than I've ever been before and chasing that personal best and trying to do better every single day. And I love the feeling of having something that can chase like that. So for me, it's always about trying to be personally better than you were before. And what does that look like today? And what does that look like tomorrow? And I also found that in my time off, I was no longer chasing personal best in the pool. So I had to readjust to, okay, my personal best used to look like doing 6 hours of exercise a day. Now what does it look like? And for me, it was like, okay, you just got up 30 minutes earlier and you did some yoga stretches. Like, that's enough. That's allowed to be enough for today. So readjusting to it. So I was like, well, I'd like something where I can share this a little bit. So PB is swim gear, so pull buoys, kickboards, fins, caps. And then alongside it comes a video explaining how to use it in your training sessions. My Instagram page, I share some sessions and ways to integrate it into your training and swimming tips along the way. And I was spending a lot of time with ocean swim groups and pool swim groups, and there's a lot of people that love swimming. And I was like, well, I've been doing this since I was 7 years old. Maybe I should find a way to share some of that knowledge with this incredible community. The swim community is an incredible community, and there's a lot of amazing people in it. So I was like, what's the way that I can share it? So I was like, okay, I'll start selling the gear, explaining how to use it, build up a bit of a library of sessions so that even if you're not connected to a swim squad immediately, there's somewhere for you to go to find it. And for me, swimming was my way from coming from a little outcast from Africa who didn't wear shoes and didn't really fit in. Sport was how I found out I belonged. And I'm really passionate about sharing knowledge that helps people find that.
What do you think the one thing that you would take from your athletic career into your burgeoning business career would be?
I think the one thing that's easy to pull across is not to stop when a challenge comes up. I mean, as we talked about, my first big challenge came when I was 15. I had hip surgery. There have been already multiple challenges, and I'm not very technology minded, so the challenges keep on coming. But that doesn't mean I have to stop. Like, I think sports proved to me over and over again that if you're willing to be creative and push through, there will be a way around the challenge or over it or under it. And just asking for help as well. I'm used to having a team around me, which is probably the hardest thing about doing everything myself. A lot of people have asked, "Oh, who are you doing the business with?" It's like it's not a mysterious like big business thing. It's like literally just me and my computer. So it's asking people for help, and I haven't had to do a lot of that outside of the pool, but in the pool, I'm very used to asking for feedback from, say, my coach or my physio. So making sure that I keep doing that outside of just the swimming environment is also important for me.
And let's have some real talk here, Bronte. What is it like working in your togs? To be on television all the time in your swimwear? Does that suck?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the only people that like wears more to bed than they do to their job. That's actually, I stole that line from Tom Daly, but we'll still claim it. Yeah, it can be very overwhelming. I've tended not to think about it that much, but particularly when you are going through puberty and your body is changing, being fully on display all the time, I can see why many boys and girls find that incredibly nerve-wracking. So it's different, but you sort of just get used to it. It ends up being like your new normal, and the more diverse body shapes you can see around, the more normal becomes diverse. So it doesn't matter whether you look like, say, Emma McKeon, who's got like a very she's very tall and very lean, or whether you look like Molly O'Callaghan, who is a lot shorter. I used to think that you could only be successful if you were tall. And then you got someone like Molly or Libby Lenton, who came before her, who was quite a bit shorter and still super successful in their sport. So the more of that sort of diversity that comes around, I think the more it counteracts what you think success looks like. But it definitely can be hard walking around and comparing. Like, I often think that I wish my legs were just a little bit smaller, but it doesn't matter because like my legs are incredibly strong, and I've built them up to squat 100 kilos, etc. So it is sometimes hard to not have that inner voice of comparison, but definitely have to put it aside and change it to a performance mindset of like, my legs are strong as opposed to my legs are big.
And I hope you and Cate and all the swimmers around you know how important it is that young girls see strong bodies, and that being strong and physically active is actually really great, and you look fantastic, and that there are different types of bodies. Do you also know how much, you know, you and Cate have done a few really clever things, which sometimes I've looked at and gone, I wonder if they thought, you know, carefully about that, like coming out and saying, we just won silver. Like, we're not disappointed that we haven't won gold. We're ecstatic because we've won a silver. Like that flipping of perception, you've done a few times publicly. How much do you think about the young kids that are watching you as role models? And I hope you know how important that is. Do you?
Um, I mean, sometimes it comes home to us, and when I say, do I know how important it is? I think I've just never taken it very lightly. Sports people, there was a few years ago, there was a bit of a debate, like, should sports people be role models? And I always came down on the side of, it doesn't matter whether they should or not, you are. I remember looking up to the kids in the senior squad above me, let alone the Olympic swimmers. So I've never taken it lightly, and I've always understood that there could be people watching, and what you say has a lot of weight. So I do try and be very aware of that. And saying things like, we won a silver medal, this is great, this is not a failure. Definitely those sort of things are said on purpose, because the rhetoric is so counter to that. So we definitely think about it and we don't take it lightly. And that doesn't mean that I think every single boy and girl is looking at me, but it's always very sweet when someone comes up and they've either read our book or they've seen us swim and they're really excited. I remember being that age and I would have been really excited to meet someone who'd gone to the Olympics.
I remember when you and Cate talked about that, and I remember taking, obviously it was a clip on social media or whatever, and showing it to my then primary school age girls and going, look at this. Some people think these girls failed because they didn't win gold. These girls think they've kicked butt because they've won silver. And it teaches kids to reframe things, I think, in their mind, and you're modelling how we can look at something that might seem like adversity or something that might seem like a challenge or insurmountable or a disappointment or a setback, and reframing it, which seems like a deliberate. Do you guys see a counsellor? Like, how do you work with your sports psychologist so that you can reframe things in your mind?
The first sort of sports psychology we did was with our coach, who has an amazing mindset, and he sort of taught us at the start about that sort of stuff. And then I've actually worked with a human behaviorologist outside of that, who is slightly different from sports psychology, but same sort of thing as to, like, how do you work with your body to get performance? And then I just listen to a lot of things and pull bits from people and talk to the older athletes and listen to amazing podcasts like yours. And I think there's always going with the mindset of every person has something to teach you, if you're willing to listen to it and pull from it. So I may not agree with a lot of what people say, but I often pull little bits out and hold on to them and take them into my practice. It's sort of constant curiosity that drives it. And I think with the silver medal stuff, it's like, if we'd genuinely been disappointed in that performance, if that performance had genuinely been not what we had hoped for, there's a power in acknowledging that. But with that performance, it wasn't. It was a really good performance. And just because someone else puts their hand on the wall in front of you doesn't completely dismantle the effort and energy that you put into that race. And we were very aware of talking about that, because it is counter to the sort of common rhetoric of gold or nothing.
You're also now the president of the Australian Swimmers Association, and I think you've just signed a memorandum of understanding with Swimming Australia. Can you explain to us why that is such a big deal and such a historic moment?
Yeah, so I became president of the Swimmers Association, we're a group that looks after the swimmers' rights and helps advocate for their voice in the sport. So I sort of became president almost by accident when I was quite young, when I was 22. I'd been on the board for a while and there was a big changeover, and I was voted in as president and had no idea what I was doing. So I spent a long time building the association up, and we're now in a really good position where we have a really strong relationship with Swimming Australia. Our MOU entitles the swimmers to start receiving percentage of commercial revenue that they help generate. So previously, if someone had sponsored swimming, all that money would go to swimming the business. And now, granted, a small percentage can start coming to athletes and athlete groups that we can build. It's the first time we've managed to achieve it. It's a big thing for us as an association, but it speaks well to this cohort of swimmers who are really behind us, as well as to Swimming Australia, who were willing to work with us on it.
Well, congratulations. It's no mean feat to pull off something like that. Somewhat related, the gender pay gap in sport, obviously still a huge issue. We've just seen the Matildas go all the way to the semis. How important is equal pay in the sporting arena?
Yeah, equal pay for doing the same thing is so important. And we're very lucky in swimming. For a long time, we've had incredible female swimmers who've been very successful, and that's really pulled us up. And we have equal pay across, it doesn't matter what gender you are, it's based on performance. So all your categorization and all your funding is all based purely on performance. Outside of that, when you look at the commercial landscape, I remember watching male swimmers get a lot more commercial deals in a business landscape. That's also changing as we see lots of female sports people who can be sponsored by a car company, for instance, which would have been an entirely male thing even 15 years ago. So it is definitely changing. I feel lucky that within our sport, we've had equality for quite a long time, but looking outside of it into the marketplace, there is still some more to do there.
Well, Bronte, congratulations on the swimming career today. We are all behind you to make it to Paris. Fingers crossed that both of you make it there. And also congratulations on PB and for starting off something that must have seemed so overwhelming and difficult, but you're in there giving it a go and biting off that bit of elephant. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks so much.
Olympian Bronte Campbell. Make sure you're following Curveball in your podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this chat with Bronte Campbell, you might like previous episodes we've done with former Australian cricket coach Justin Langer, AFL player Brandon Jack, or this one with Olympic hurdler turned doctor Jana Pittman.
I couldn't perceive how that would be taken as anything other than look what an Aussie can do and how amazing are we as a nation in terms of just grit and just sheer determination. I even painted like a little Aussie flag on my knee that basically said dare to dream, but it's just that's not necessarily how the world works. And I think as a young athlete, that's what I struggled with. I struggled with the not understanding why you'd want to pull down something that is actually could be perceived and used to motivate and inspire young women and young athletes to come afterwards.
Catch up on Jana Pittman or any of our previous Curveball episodes at curveballshow.com. And don't forget, if you know of a leader, whether it's from the business world or the arts, or maybe it's another sporting leader, you can suggest a guest by sending me an email. hello@deadsetstudios.com. Curveball's produced by Dead Set Studios on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This episode was produced by Liam Reardon and the executive producers for Curveball are Rachel Fountain and me.